So President Joe Biden is expected to release his multi-trillion-dollar budget for the 2023 fiscal year today. Biden's spending plan will include a proposal to levy new taxes on the wealthiest Americans and corporations while providing billions of dollars in new spending. The corporate tax rate is set to go under this proposal from 21% up to 28%. And for those top 1% earners and households worth more than $100 million, Biden proposes a new 20% minimum tax. Congress touts a reduction in the federal budget deficit, though, of more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. I want to bring in to talk about this Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, joining us from our nation's capital. Mr. Arnold, good to see you as always. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you've heard some of the early nuggets, if you will, that are coming out on the president's budget. What are your first thoughts on some of this? It sounds like he's saying we got to spend money to make money and get our money under control.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it. My impression of this budget is it should go straight from the president's desk to the wastebasket. It is a horrible document. It contains $2.5 trillion in increases. If Congress implemented this budget, it would be the largest tax hike in American history. Of course, at a time when our economy is still very fragile. This president thinks the economy is doing gangbusters, but average Americans obviously disagree when you see the inflation, gas prices, all of these things that we have to spend money on a day-to-day basis, absolutely out of control in terms of price increases. So there's a real disconnect between what the president is saying, this budget that they're releasing, and what Americans are experiencing on an everyday basis.
You know, I'm not an economist, and, I try to balance my own checkbook the best I can, but we're talking about a proposal here that would take the corporate tax rate from 21% up to 28%. I think the casual observer, somebody like myself with not a lot of background in economy and those kinds of issues, would say, now, wait a minute, these taxes on the corporations have already had to raise salaries to attract and keep workers. Everybody's making a ton more out there these days. So you've already got those corporations paying more for workers. Now you're going to tax them more. At some point, that's going to perhaps affect the price of the goods and services out there that we're already paying more for. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's like you have an economics degree because that's exactly what happens when you raise the cost do business on corporations, and there's taxes, there's all sorts of inputs, there's labor costs. All of these factors are more expensive right now than they were just a couple of years ago. You push taxes to 28% corporate rate, that would be one of the highest rates in the industrialized nation, in the industrialized world. So what you would see is corporations relocating activity, new corporate formation, new companies sprouting up in our rival nations rather than on U.S. soil. That means fewer jobs. It's less economic activity, and it's really bad for this country, especially, again, at a very fragile economic period in our nation's history.
And I have to wonder, too, when most people hear, oh, the budget came out today, I think most people would say, you guys actually follow a budget? Because you don't seem to, in terms of what most folks see on the level of what's being spent in Washington and borrowed. I mean, we're $30 trillion in debt.
Right, $30 trillion in debt, and we just spent about $6 trillion over this past 2-year period fighting COVID. And some of that was probably necessary, a lot of it was not, but whatever, it's mostly out the door at this point. What we need now is some leadership on fiscal issues. We need to restrain spending. We need to make sure taxes are at a low rate that encourage job creation, that all small business owners in particular, they keep as much money as they possibly can in their wallets at a time when they're facing labor costs, higher costs to buy products that they need to operate their businesses. Unfortunately, this budget goes in the opposite direction. I think we would see significantly higher debt deficits associated with this because it continues to spend and tax at irresponsible rates, even as the president is claiming that he's addressing the deficit. He's actually doing the opposite portion.
Well, I think a lot remains to be seen, and I appreciate getting your thoughts on this. We'll see when it actually comes out. Brandon Arnold, the Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union, thanks so much for your time. We'll have you back to give us more perspective again. Thanks so much.